Recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Casar.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a report from the Democratic staff of the Senate Help Committee, which found that the Office of Civil Rights reached a 12-year low last year in protecting students from discrimination. It's titled, "Justice Denied: How Trump's Office of Civil Rights Reached a 12-Year Low in Protecting Students from Discrimination, Reaching Zero Resolution Agreements in 2025.
Without objection, so ordered.
Good morning, Secretary McMahon. We're here to talk about the budget for the Department of Education, so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about school funding and funding in our schools. Can you tell me how much more or less it costs to give a child free lunch at a public school?
Well, the Department of Education does not control, that's not part of our budget.
I know, but when the USDA does that funding, it's about $4.60 for a school lunch. Do you know about how much the average school teacher makes at a public school per year?
That varies across different states. It can be anywhere from 40-some thousand to 90-some thousand.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's about $64,000 on average nationwide. So here's an easy one because it's all over the news. Can you tell us how much Congress is being asked to vote on next week for President Trump's ballroom?
I don't know that answer.
It's $1 billion. And you're a businesswoman, so I'm hoping you can help me do some math here. $4.60 for a school lunch, $1 billion for a ballroom. Can you tell me about how many free school lunches that $1 billion could pay for?
It is my understanding on the ballroom, excuse me, and I've heard the president say this, the taxpayer dollars will not be used to build the ballroom, that they are donations from private enterprise.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll have entered into the record some Republicans, this article from NBC yesterday, some Republicans aren't sold on $1 billion price tag for Trump's ballroom project in party line GOP bill.
Without objection.
We are voting on $1 billion in taxpayer dollars in addition to those private donations. And so for those $1 billion in taxpayer dollars, at $4.60 a lunch, that is 217,391,304 lunches. That's lunch for more than 1 million kids, 1 million Americans for the entire school year. But let's say that we're not going to talk about lunches because that's USDA. We can talk about teachers. At $64,000 a year, do we know how many new teachers we could hire if we sent $1 billion out to the states for reducing class sizes and hiring more teachers?
I'm sure you have that number.
Yes, it is 15,000 more teachers. Or we could pay for the Office of Civil Rights that's being cut in this budget 7 times over. I think you get the point. So here's my real question here. As Secretary of Education, which do you think helps our nation more? Getting free lunch to more than 1 million more kids, 15,000 more teachers, or the ballroom?
I think those are incredibly weird comparisons. I do believe that our teachers should be paid well for what they do. I think teachers are underpaid. I think teachers should also be paid for performance. And I would like to see us have our teachers be compensated. I'd like to also see that there would be teachers who were paid more than administrators in schools. We have more administrators, you know, and they're paid higher salaries than our teachers are. And I think state budgets, all of that, should take all of that into consideration when they're hiring their teachers, because it is state budgets that...
Then I do think it is weird that next week, like you said, it's a weird question, because it's weird that next week we're being asked to vote for $1 billion for a ballroom, while there are cuts to the Department of Education and cuts to education. In my own community in Austin, Texas, they are about to cut 200 positions at Austin ISD, close 10 schools. This budget makes it worse by cutting the equivalent of about 400 teachers' salaries in my district. So I'm asking for you, as being a member of Donald Trump's cabinet, to tell us, do you support $1 billion for the ballroom when we could use that $1 billion to raise teacher salaries, as you've said, or use that $1 billion to hire 15,000 more teachers? How can you defend the ballroom, or do you defend the ballroom, if we could use that $1 billion for the needs of our kids in our schools?
Congressman, those budgets that you're alluding to are state budgets. They're not federal budgets.
But we send money to the states and their school districts, and they hire teachers, right?
Teacher salaries come out of state budgets. They don't come out of federal budgets.
When we send federal money to schools, and then they hire teachers. When you send Title I money to schools, they get grants from the federal government, they hire staff. They hire teachers. They're getting a cut here. We could send $1 billion more, but it sounds like you don't want to defend Donald Trump's ballroom here.
I think the ballroom has many different opportunities, and the president's alluded to them. I think we saw one just recently when there was an attempted assassination on the president's life in a ballroom that was not secure.
Right, and of course that was horrific and unacceptable. The question before us is, if we were to vote on an extra $1 billion, do you think it should go to our kids and education or to this East Ballroom project?
I think we need to look at the budget overall in its entirety.
And I think the gentleman's
I yield
time
back.
has expired and yields.
So here's what you need to understand about that exchange and about the bill Congress is about to vote on. When Donald Trump announced the East Wing modernization project last summer, he posted about it in capital letters. Zero taxpayer funding, he wrote. The whole thing, every dollar, would come from private donors. That was the deal he made with the American public. The project started at around $200 million. By October, it had grown to $250 million. By the end of 2025, $300 million. And when Senate Republicans dropped their spending bill last week, there it was, $400 million in private donations and a brand new $1 billion line item for taxpayer-funded security costs tied to the Ballroom project. That was Donald Trump in the summer of 2025. This is Donald Trump now. Think about that. Now, the administration's justification for that $1 billion is the assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on April 25th. A 31-year-old California man named Cole Allen ran past a security checkpoint at the Washington Hilton while armed. Officers stopped him. One was shot, his bullet-resistant vest absorbing the round. And Secret Service Director Sean Curran, the guy whose job it is to defend this operation, said afterward that the system worked exactly as designed. The suspect was stopped at the farthest outer security line, 355 feet from the president, with 2 staircases, a doorway, and dozens of armed officers between them. And look, the Correspondents' Dinner is a private journalists' association event held at a hotel in downtown Washington. Even if the White House ballroom had been finished that night, it wouldn't have been the venue. That is the justification they are asking you to accept. And in case you're wondering whether she has any real background in education, she doesn't. Linda McMahon built her career as the CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment. She served on Connecticut's State Board of Education for about a year before leaving to run for Senate. The Senate confirmed her as the 13th Secretary of Education in March 2025, 51-45, straight down party lines. She now leads an agency that the president who appointed her has pledged to eliminate. That is who was being asked to defend cutting civil rights enforcement for kids. Got it. But here's the thing. What Greg Casar entered into the record yesterday wasn't opposition research. It was a documented takedown, a formal record of everything that went wrong. The Democratic staff on the Senate's Education and Labor Committee spent weeks mapping what happened to the Office of Civil Rights under her watch. In March 2025, her department fired 299 of 575 civil rights enforcement staff. 7 of 12 regional offices shut down. Courts intervened. The firings were blocked. The administration eventually took the firings back. But the enforcement machine had already seized up, and what the headline number doesn't tell you is what that actually meant for the kids on the other end of those calls. Federal law requires OCR to open every single complaint that falls under its authority. The office doesn't get to filter its caseload. So, the 12-year low in formal agreements to fix civil rights violations wasn't from fewer problems to investigate. The same report makes clear that OCR was on pace to receive a record number of civil rights complaints in 2025. More requests for help than any recent year on file. What happened to those complaints? 9 out of 10 resolved cases were simply dismissed rather than remedied. Dismissed. Not fixed, not remedied, just closed. And when the department shuttered those 7 regional offices, it didn't just slow response times. It eliminated the only point of contact for federal civil rights enforcement in communities that had no other path to recourse. The backlog that built during those 9 months doesn't dissolve when staff return. It keeps growing. I want you to sit with that. And this isn't abstract. Austin Independent School District is staring down a budget deficit projected to hit $181 million by the end of next school year. The board voted in November to close 10 campuses this summer. District leaders have proposed cutting more than 200 full-time positions. And part of the reason enrollment keeps falling? Superintendent Matias Segura and district officials have linked the decline directly to federal immigration enforcement pushing families out of Austin. The federal government is doing that. And then asking Congress for $1 billion for a ballroom? Now her state budget's answer. Could there be anything more convenient? Here's what she conveniently left out. That argument has a specific history. It's the exact argument the Reagan administration made in 1981 when it tried to eliminate the Department of Education entirely. A Republican-controlled Congress looked at that argument and voted it down. She isn't making this up on the spot. She's reciting a 44-year-old policy position that her own party's predecessors rejected. And here's what makes it worse. Title I, the federal program that sends money directly to schools in low-income communities alone provides $18.4 billion a year. When House Republicans' budget proposal called for cutting that program by 27%, district officials across the country ran the math on what that meant for their payroll. Congress rejected it for this fiscal year. But the direction was not ambiguous, and teachers in places like Austin are still bracing for what comes next. And look, this bill isn't even sailing through a unified Republican Party. Rand Paul of Kentucky, who chairs the Senate Homeland Security Committee, predicted publicly that the ballroom item gets cut before the full Senate ever votes on it. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska said she needs far more detail before she votes yes. Jim Justice of West Virginia, a reliable Trump ally, told ABC News the cost was enormous and said he couldn't imagine spending $1 billion on security. One unnamed House Republican told a national publication that swing seat members think the White House doesn't really get it, that they don't understand how badly this hurts them with voters heading into the next elections. So, to anybody in the Republican conference currently sweating this vote, yeah, you should be, because here's why. A CNN poll out this week found that 77% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, say his policies have raised their cost of living in their own community. 2-to-1 opposition to the Ballroom project already existed before taxpayers even knew they'd be on the hook for $1 billion security bill.